So first, I want to begin with a short chant. And if any of you know the chant, you're willing to follow along by heart, or to chant together, or if you don't know the words but you feel so moved, you can even just hum along to have your body and mind sharing in the rhythm. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namang sanghang namasami. My deep reverence to the Blessed One, the Noble One, the perfectly and rightly self-awakened One, the Buddha, the Blessed One, and to all of the venerable and noble, liberating Dhamma teachings that have existed or will ever exist. And also to all of the members of the Sangha, all the saints, sages, enlightened and awakened ones, and also those who are progressing through the stages of the path, through their effort, through your effort, and energy and dedication, applying yourself to reducing and ending the causes of suffering and giving rise to developing, fulfilling and bringing to fruit causes of awakening. So this is the second gathering under the topic of moral awakening, and I'm very grateful this time that it's possible to be on with you via this network, because we have a mega storm coming into Northern California that's supposed to give us 10 to 12 inches of rain suddenly over the next few days. And we're very fortunate that here still the sun is shining on the leaves of the Bodhi tree and the Dhamma wheel flags, and our power has not gone out from the storm. So I'm glad to be able to join you. If we were at our hermitage, Aranya Bodhi Awakening Forest Hermitage is off grid. So when the grid goes down, we don't have to worry because we're not connected to them. But here at our vihara, our temporary Tathālokā Vihara in Santa Rosa area, this place is on grid. So unless we all become arahantas or super high level bodhisattvas, so we can communicate together via just the web of consciousness, as some of the old stories say was possible for the ancient awakened ones. Until that time, I'm very glad that we're still able to connect in this way. So today there's an aspect of moral awakening, a further aspect that I would like to speak about. And this aspect also is one that's been very near and dear to my heart over time. And it's part of the reason, in fact, that we have an off-grid forest hermitage where there's more than 400 acres of redwood forest on the Sonoma coast that's being allowed to regrow, sequestering more carbon than any other kind of tree life on the planet. The redwood forest does that. And, that's part of the subject that we're going to be talking about today in under the heading that I chose of karma, sustainability, and freedom. I had thought first just to talk about karma and sustainability, but then for my own heart, if we're going to talk about sustainability and karma, we have to talk about freedom also. And properly in the Buddha's teaching, in fact, the Buddha said that he taught three about three courses of action, three main courses of action. Here, action means karma, and or three paths of action. One being the dark path, and you might remember from the end of the first teaching, we ended by talking about the bright path and the dark path. So one is the dark path, the second is the bright path, the third is the clear and liberating path. So the Buddha mentioned that his teaching, when analyzed into these three courses of action and three paths, is to avoid the dark path, to close off the roads to the dark path. Very simple. And to open up the roads to the bright path and liberating path. And so, there are many Buddhists who focus on the bright path, on accumulating merit and virtue, and developing themselves in their merit and their virtue. And we had talked about the powers that are involved in this last time, in developing those are two of the powers that are there. Developing that power, and then to be reborn in a heavenly realm, or to be reborn over and over again, while further developing themselves. And that is, in fact, according to the stories, the course that the Buddha himself took, but not just the one of endless development of merit, according to the early Buddhist teachings, or Theravada Buddhist teachings, but conjoined with the liberating path. The liberating path actually may not, to awaken, may not actually require such an enormous amount of merit, as we were speaking about earlier. One doesn't even have to have the merit of being able to teach to become liberated. There are teachers who don't have any special charisma, but then if you put these two together, that merit and then intentions of generosity and kindness, and you develop all of those things in conjunction with the path of liberation, then you have something in terms of Buddhism that's sustainable. The Dhamma wheel can continue to turn. The teaching will be able to be passed on to others in a way that's effective. They will be able to use it, and hopefully a good number of them will also be able to pass on that teaching, share it with others, and the sasana, Buddha's dispensation or teaching, that Dhamma wheel will be able to continue to turn in the world. So that would be called the sustainability, or the long life of the sasana, ayu of the sasana. That's one aspect of sustainability leading to freedom in Dhamma. We had also spoken about Dhamma as a culture, the meaning of Dhamma as a culture, and a culture of awakening, in which moral awakening plays a very large part. It plays an enormous role. So we spoke about that as being a foundational karma, or foundational practices that carry through and actually also end up being fruition, or the fruits of the path, which is how we often see this and recognize it in others. Is when there is not only the effort or the practice going on, but we see the fruit in others, and that's so encouraging and helpful. And beneficial. So this is part of the blessing and refuge of the Sangha, and the role that the Sangha plays in the sustainability of both the Dhamma itself and also the path of practice and awakening. Now, a part about this that's been especially close to my heart, or one part of it that I want to talk about today, is about the culture that's developed in our contemporary world that I would call non-dharmic culture. Non-dharmic because of being unwise, giving strong emphasis, even in many people's thought, a kind of moral value to greed, a kind of moral value to hatred, morally justified hatred. Yes, that it seems to justify certain people being up and exploiting other humans and exploiting animals, and also gravely exploiting our environment in a way that's so unwise it actually, to some people's minds, threatens the very existence not only of the many species that are going extinct every day in addition to human beings, but this action in the kind of boomerang effect that karma or action has. Then the boomerang is that that destroys others, and then it comes back and destroys oneself. Yes, so that would be called a characteristic of the dark path. When I was speaking about these three courses of action, it's the type of action that is characterized by the dark path, not the bright one, and not the liberating one. Of course, the bright path too. That means that you do things that are wise and wholesome, healthy, helpful, and liberating. Well, no, in fact, for the boomerang, not liberating, but just beautiful, healthy, wholesome, wonderful things. And the boomerang comes back and kisses you. It comes back and kisses you and hugs you rather than killing you. It comes back as a good friend, a dear friend. The Buddha mentioned on one occasion that our good actions, our good karma, both in the short run and the middle run and the long run, can be like our dearest friend, like our most beloved one, who will come back and kiss and hug us and give us flowers and give us presents and be so nice and so wonderful to us. So this is the kind of friendship that you really want to cultivate and develop. And it could even be called, through your action, through your wise action, being your own best friend. Yes, but this action is not only to be one's own best friend, but it's also to be a kind of excellent friend to others, to other human beings, and to other species, other living beings. And when I say living beings, I don't only mean the animal kingdom. I actually mean many other kinds of living beings as well, both visible and invisible. Now, living in the redwood forest for some period of time, I came to be aware, to my sense, that there's a level of sense happening amidst the trees in the redwood forest, and that they actually have something that I could only best equate to neural networks that are connecting them. And now in the human body, the neural networks look very much, in fact, like tree roots or tree branches spread through the body, but on the inside of the body. And for the trees, then you see this when you look at the roots and you look at the branches, and you see them spread through the earth and spread through the air. And for the redwoods, when they spread through the earth, they connect to one another, even over miles and miles and miles. A friend just visited us recently over this past weekend. Our vihara, our monastery, and our hermitage do welcome and allow visitors who come to which to stay with our monastic community for some time. And she came to stay with us for several days, visited our hermitage, and then she saw that there were these ancient trunks of trees that had charcoal on the inside. She was wanting to know what's going on with charcoal on the inside. It's from a fire that happened in the 1970s in the Armstrong Woods, miles and miles and miles away. And through that neural network of roots, the redwood forest, then that spread many miles away, all the way over to the redwoods that were on the coast. So amazing. And there you can see the char that came up from the roots on the inside. So there are these connections. Even the trees have these connections between one another, not to mention us and, in fact, all forms of life. And our actions, our karma, also in a way are like that. There's a connectivity there that means that, when I struck the bell, there was the sound just at that time, and then there was the period of time that you could hear the sound extending on. And if you had more sensitive ears, you could hear it even for a longer time. And like a drop of water coming down into a pond, you can see the ripples spreading out and spreading out and spreading out. And there's the point where maybe you get bored and don't watch it anymore, because it just keeps on going and keeps on going until it touches something, and then that makes further ripples and just continues like that. So the Buddha mentioned the karma. There's the immediate effect, and also the middle term effect, and the long term effect for most humans is beyond what we would normally attend to. But in the awakening process, this is one of the things, the three Tevijja or Trividya, the three knowledges that come with awakening that are part of completely reconciling the heart of the awakened one, because they see causation over the long term and they understand how it works. And any kind of resentment or any kind of unbalance or bend, distortion, or contortion in the mind related to not seeing and understanding causation properly, that makes us desire more or makes us have some kind of retributive mind or resentment or some kind of negativity towards anything that's ever happened for anyone at any time. That distortion gets cleared up because we see and we know, this is why, this is how it happened. That knowledge then is not only about the past, that knowledge relates to what we do in the present and what they do in the present. And that's the root source of Dhammic culture, is then the behavior of those who are awakened ones. There's a question. Is it imitatable? Is it to be imitated? Is that a valid or valuable thing to do? Yes? And the answer that emerges in this path of practice is yes, it is. The 5 precepts are supposed to be the natural behavior of the Arahants, the awakened ones. But they definitely wouldn't do something different than the 5 precepts. When we undertake the 5 precepts or greater numbers of precepts and practice with them, we may be imitating in a way the behavior of someone who's more awakened, but it's an effective imitation. Yeah? Especially if it comes with an intention for welfare, well-being, and liberation. Because the action itself, the action is effective. It has effect. That refraining from causes of harm stops creating those causes of harm. And the engaging in wholesome and virtuous action creates effects from that. And in indulging or engaging in practices that are liberating also have their effect. So this is a very wonderful thing. So I want to speak a little bit about one of the Buddha's teachings on this topic. Now, many of you will know, I think all of those who are here right now may know, that the Buddha did not go into monastic life as a virgin. He had married beforehand. He had a wife and he had a child. Yes, some later stories say that he even had several wives, or even many wives. It seems like the farther along you get, the more wives he has. People question, was he a man enough? Was he manly? Like needing to prove his manhood for having become a monk or something. This is very funny. needing to, people feeling this need, but some people felt that need, so trying to bolster the manhood of someone who's become a monk. I see some drawings these days also of bhikkhunis. I think it's very funny because it's like trying to bolster the womanhood of she who has become a monastic, also to emphasize or that kind of thing. It's not the point, really. but I also understand. So the Buddha had a son in the Pali texts. His son was born very shortly before he left home and went forth as a seeker. There's supposed to have been a lunar eclipse, and then lunar eclipse in the Indic language is Rahula. So then his son was named Rahula. Maybe after the lunar eclipse, maybe not. Anyhow, he left home at that time and then practiced for around 6 years before his complete awakening, his bodhi. And then it was another year, nearly, before he returned to his hometown of Kapilavastu. And when he returned, then he saw his former wife. You don't actually have to get divorced to enter into monastic life, but your spouse should give permission. And so he saw his former wife, who had also been practicing home asceticism until that time. Later on, when the Bhikkhunī Sangha was founded, she's supposed to have become a Bhikkhunī, and in fact, one of the Buddha's great disciples as a Bhikkhunī. And in fact, as we were speaking about earlier, one of the really amazing things about her that she was recognized by the Buddha for was she was one of the foremost amongst his disciples for her ability to see back in the past, even back through universal eons of expansion and contraction. So more so than any of the other bhikkhunis, and more so apparently than only one other of the Buddha's disciples or the Buddha himself. So this power was particularly strong in her. And I thought to mention that because yesterday in the United States, National Women's History Month started. It's the whole month of March here in the United States. And so I thought to mention one of those who we could call our first great woman historian in Buddhism, foremost as commended by the Buddha himself, was the mother of the Buddha's son. So when the Buddha returned to his hometown, he came back holding his alms bowl together with the other monks, and they walked for alms in the city that was his hometown. And then the Buddha's father was a Raja, a king, kind of freaked out to hear about that, very upset. Our lineage, our family lineage, our family history, we never had someone begging on the streets like this before, and like he's crown prince and now comes back and with the alms bowl on the streets. And if you think people may be shocked to see Buddhist monks with alms bowls on the streets of America and the United States, they were shocked at that time. Who was their prince? Who was there on the streets begging? But the Buddha mentioned at that time that he now identified with the lineage of the awakened ones, the Buddha Vamsa, that would be called the lineage of the awakened ones, including even many past Buddhas Buddhas, and that this is the Dhamma, this is the way, this is the natural course of behavior, culture, and a livelihood that is a natural characteristic of the lineage of the Buddhas. So when the Buddha's former wife told her son and the Buddha's son to go ask his father for his inheritance, guess what happened? One of the monks gave Rahula an alms bowl and then asked him to follow him. That was Sariputta. And so at the age of 7, according to the Pali text, the Buddha's son became a Buddhist monastic. So we have teachings that were given to the Buddha's son, his own flesh and blood. You know, he mentioned in one of the suttas, the Metta Sutta, you know, how a parent loves their only child. If they have only one heir and their only child, to develop that kind of love. This was the Buddha's only child, and the love that he was recommending, the compassion, the appreciation that he was recommending, then extending out to all living beings. So this was a very important part of what he then taught to his son as part of his inheritance to his son. And the Buddha recommended to all those who encountered him, people gave food, people gave robes, people gave lodgings, and there were those who came to the Sangha to gain those benefits. And these days also, sometimes people come for elements of Buddhist culture that might be about the food or about the, the embellishments or the trappings, these kinds of things. But he recommended that they be his heirs in Dhamma. I really love this. This is an open invitation to all of us, this inheritance that the Buddha has put out in the world, like a bank account that all you have to do is have the passcode to be able to go in and draw out the gold, draw out the wealth. The Buddha put his inheritance in there in store for us. All we have to do is go and take that passcode and put it in and open it up and then access it for ourselves. And we then are also legitimate heirs of the Dhamma, heirs of the Buddha. I love this open invitation to us. This was taken so seriously that there are still monastics today. I know a Venerable Bhikkhunī down in the Bay. Her name is Venerable Handri Shakya. She wasn't born in the Shakya clan, but there are many monastics these days who still legally take the name of Shakya, Shakyaputra or Shakyadita, to be like sons or daughters of the Buddha, to mean this. But this is an open inheritance, not through the bloodline, but through the heart line of the Dhamma. I want to share this teaching of the Buddhas with you. This is the Rahula Ovada Sutta, one of them. There are several teachings that the Buddha gave to Rahula. This one is from Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses of the Buddha, number 61. And at that time, Venerable Rahula had already become a monk. Yes, he was a young monk at this time, a teenager. He was staying, actually he might have been even younger for this one, I'm not quite sure. He was staying at a place called Mango Stone. For those who are here who know the suttas well, they might suddenly have recognized which teaching this is. The Buddha himself was not staying there. He was staying at a place called the Bamboo Grove, the Veluvana, the Squirrel Sanctuary. And he left there and he went to visit Rahula at Mango Stone. And when Venerable Rahula saw the Buddha coming, then he set out washing water for the Buddha to wash his feet. And then the Buddha, having washed his feet and sat down to join Rahula, his son, and set to work on his son becoming his heir in Dhamma. not only his bodily air. And the first teaching that he gives to him then is with the water and the water dipper. Water is used in teaching the Dhamma. These images of water are used very, very many times. And also the containers for holding water are very commonly used. In this case, the Buddha shows the water dipper and then pours it out. And he starts speaking about a person of integrity, a person of morals. And he speaks about this person as samanya. Samanya is a very interesting word. It's very, very close to the word that we use for monastic in Buddhism, or the old Samana tradition. That Buddhist monasticism arose out of that Samana tradition. And so this tradition adopted this word for the name of the whole tradition, of which Buddhism was a part. So many people, as I said before, many people call the Buddha the Maha Samana, the great Samana. So the Buddha then mentions to Rahula that one of the characteristics of being a samana, or being samanya, which one could say is a contemplative, or literally anya, it has knowing in it. And then the sama part of it is translated to be in touch, to be in tune, to be in harmony, to be peaceful, to be sensitive. So sometimes people involved in Buddhism say that they're spiritual, not religious. Yeah. And so there's this whole kind of tradition developing that's like a spiritual tradition of those into spirituality. So in ancient terms, in the Buddhist time, there was this whole even kind of counterculture tradition that was samanya. So in touch, in tune, in harmony with the quality of knowing, knowledge, wisdom. This element of the harmony is very important. So the Buddha says to be samanya, with the double meaning there, because Rahula has entered monastic life. So it's like for this path, but also to be a good monastic in this path, one should be nati laja, which means should not be without, and here laja is translated again shame. Yeah, it's defined as one who has no hiri, one who has no otapa. So if anyone is joining for the first time, I wish that you will listen to the recording of our previous week to learn more about what that is. But it's defined as not having a sense of moral disinclination to doing what is harmful. So that dark path, that dark course, that karma, not having any disinclination. Like there's no boundary, there's no restraint, there's no containment on engaging in such actions of body, physical actions, speech, verbal actions, or mind. Now this word laja should not be confused with the very similar Indic word lancha, which sounds very, very similar, but lancha means almost the opposite. Lancha is a bribe, or someone who has this characteristic is someone who is corrupt or susceptible to corruption, generally through greed. Means they want something, and so they're willing to compromise. They're willing to compromise their morals or their conscience, or even do away with their conscience for the sake of that greed, or for the sake of wanting to destroy someone or something. Or of course, these things are just rooted in delusion. They're just rooted in delusion. Though generally it means being willing to take benefit from something that's either dishonest or immoral. I'd like to stop and reflect for just a moment on the culture of our contemporary world and society and just ask the question, as a culture, as a society, are we doing things out of greed or desire for material benefits that involve that kind of corruption? Either blindness out of delusion or even willing blindness, like not wanting to see the harm that comes from that. And with that, I mean, the element of delusion pretty much has to be there because it's also, I've heard from people, it's like, I'm glad I'm going to be passing away in a few years because I don't want to see the effects of what we're doing now. Now, if we were Yasodhara, the Buddha's former wife, who was able to look back in history, and we were able to see the results of the actions playing out over time like that, would that seem a wise way to think? Would that seem a wise course of action to be engaging in behavior that we definitely don't want to see the results of? This would be considered like the depths of delusion in a way. So I have concern for our contemporary aspects of our contemporary culture that tend towards such delusion. And then act in ways that could be considered almost like this lancha here in the Buddha's teaching that is definitely recommended to avoid, where we want to take benefits or get pleasure or get benefit from something that if we look at it, either we already know there's the harmful consequence in it, or if we look at it, we see there's a harmful consequence. So the Buddha's teaching here, Mantu Rahula, runs. Whenever you want to do a bodily action, this is kaya kama, it's bodily action, you should reflect on it. This bodily action I want to do, would it lead to self-affliction, to the affliction of others, or to both? Would it be an unskillful bodily action with painful consequences, painful results? Sometimes I hear people say that Theravada is like Hinayana and is very selfish, only about oneself. And yet here we hear the Buddha speaking to his own flesh and blood son out of the kindness and metta of his heart in a way that then has been passed down and shared with all of us as the Buddha's heirs in Dhamma. He definitely mentions lead to the self-affliction, to the affliction of others, or to both. And as we'll soon see, this pattern is repeated over and over and over again. This would be called an essential, fundamental teaching of Theravada Buddhism. So that's very important to know, and also I think to reflect upon again and again, so as to internalize this pattern. If our own systems are wired in any other way, to reflect upon this again and again, to rewire our systems in patterns of wisdom, so that our systems become courses of wisdom. The Buddha continues, if on reflection you know it would lead to self-affliction, to the affliction of others, or to both, it would be an unskillful bodily action with painful consequences, painful results, then any bodily action of that sort is absolutely unfit for you to do. It's quite clear, I think. And then he goes on, but if on reflection you know it would not cause affliction, it would be a skillful bodily action with pleasant consequences, pleasant results. This is the bright course, or the liberating course here that we're talking about. Then any bodily action of that sort is fit for you to do. Then while you're doing a bodily action, you should reflect thus. Having done a bodily action, you should reflect thus. These are the three frames of time. So one is projecting into the future before doing something, before doing anything, in fact. The Buddha mentions very clearly any sort of bodily action. And then he mentions while you're doing it also. So this is awakening, a kind of moral awakening in the present moment, to be able to awake enough to reflect, be recollective, to have mindfulness and clear comprehension of what is being done now according to these criteria. And then also about the past. Having done a bodily action, you should reflect thus. And the whole teaching then repeats. I'm not going to repeat the whole thing, but it's very wonderful to chant when we chant these teachings and to read it entirely, because just reading these things over and over again about the future, about the present, about the past, and then not only bodily actions, but also verbal actions in the future, in the present, in the past, not only verbal actions, but also our mental actions, any action of mind. Whenever you want to do a mental action, you should reflect thus. While you're doing a mental action, you should reflect thus. Having done a mental action, you should reflect thus. So early in my monastic life, I was instructed in the evening, at the end of the day, before sleeping, to reflect in this kind of way, to think back over the day, and not in a self-aggrandizing way, and not in a punitive way. We were supposed to avoid those two extremes, but with as balanced, samajita, as balanced of a mind as possible, with the quality of samanya, this harmonious mind of knowing, peaceful mind, to just reflect back for the development and growth of wisdom and of insight, for the sake of then informing our future actions, putting things for settling them well. So if we're able to learn from what we've done, there's a way that it can be well settled. If it was unskillful, you simply recognize it's unskillful. Learn from it, make an affirmation not to repeat it, think about how it can be done better, and let it go. Yes, not that we have to keep chains around our neck, keep chains around our wrists, around our ankles, these chains on ourselves with regards things that we've done that we feel regret or remorse for. Then those chains, bind us to that unwholesome action, and we become the slaves of it in a way, punished by it over and over again. We said something foolish one time, and I'm sorry to have said it one time, but then if we think about it unskillfully over and over again, that's also new karma. It's making new, unskillful karma over and over and over again. Not letting that one time be enough, learn from it and get over it and be free and be more wise and skillful, but lashing ourselves over and over again for it, for others. Very unskillful. So this is about waking up to our mental actions as well as our verbal actions, what we're saying internally or externally, and then also our actions of body, our physical behaviors, and of course in the course of the Noble Eightfold Path, and our actions go into our livelihood and all the other aspects of Dhamma practice. So the Buddha then says, Rahula, all those samanas and brahmins, and in this case, I think he's talking about all that we would maybe now say are spiritual people or religious people or people interested in knowing more or awakening or coming into harmony or developing balance in their lives. The Brahmin, the Buddha mentioned many times, took it out of the category of those who were hereditary priests and brought it into the category of the meaning of someone who's it's a very excellent mind. All those samanas and brahmins in the course of the past who purified their bodily actions, who purified their verbal actions, who purified their mental actions. It means their karma of body, speech, and mind. All of them did so through repeated reflection on just this, on their bodily actions, on their verbal actions, on their mental actions in just this way. And then he goes into the 3 times again, all those in the future who will so purify their minds, will do so via this very practice. And all those at present who are purifying their minds are doing so via this practice. So this is a very key practice, looking into and understanding causation and understanding what works well, and it relates to this path of practice. Definitely. And also, I clearly see how it can be related to all sorts of fields in our contemporary world for the sharing of Dhammic culture, wisdom culture, a culture that is sustainable and reduces the negativity or harmful actions and behaviors and increases those that are wise, blessed, beneficial, peaceful, kind, noble, even liberating. This is a salient characteristic. So the Buddha says then to Rahula that he should make an affirmation. And thus, Rahula, you should train yourself. And then the whole thing repeats, I will purify my bodily actions thus, ... I will purify my verbal actions thus. This is the verbal karma. I will purify my mental actions through repeated reflection on this principle. So this is a way we're talking about our neurobiology and our minds, communication systems that we have in these bodies and in our worlds. This is a way of patterning them, even repatterning them in a way that removes distortions, harmful distortions that both the distortions, it's like a convolution or a bent, literally in the Pali, it's like a crook or a crick. In my countryside, where I grew up in the countryside, would say a crick. Crooked, not clear and straight. So this is a way of clearing that up. And if we go to the water analogy, then it just allows the free flow of the water without it getting blocked or directed off into things that are unwholesome, unwise, and unskillful. So the Buddha says in sum, the very end, Evam hivo Rahula Sikita Panati. Sikita Panati. Thus should you train yourself. This is the training. So the Sikha in here, in this case, is part of the threefold set of higher morality in the Buddha's teaching that is very much a part of both the ground and the awakening aspect in moral awakening. So Adi Sila, or higher morality, has its 3 parts: in developing the higher mind and developing higher wisdom. And Adi Sila in this case then is relating to also the sphere of action, the sphere of behavior, the 3 bases of body, speech, and mind. So I'd like to say a little bit more about samanya, which I talked about earlier. In ancient cultures, the terminology of music was used to describe the moral quality of people and of actions. Discordant intervals or poorly tuned musical instruments were metaphors for evil. Harmonious intervals and well-tuned instruments were used as metaphors for good. In Pali, the term sama, even, balanced, peaceful, in tune, describes an instrument tuned on pitch. There's a famous passage in the numerical discourses of the Buddha, where the Buddha reminds Sona Kolirisa, who had been overexerting himself in practice, that a lute sounds well only if it's strung not too tight, not too loose. So this teaching here is one that is fundamental characteristic of the Buddha's middle way instructions. This is a middle way path of the contemplative or of the spiritual person. So not needing to, punish oneself, be too hard, even, too hard, too tight. The Buddha said it's ineffective. And, as I was talking about the further lashes, it's like just causing more suffering, more negative karma. And too loose, not able to well engage effectively, and if just following one's desires with ignorance, with delusion, they lead here, they lead there, and then, as whether individuals or whether as collectives, as groups of people doing that, and also like the cattle who are just running out over the pasture and just enjoying all running together. They're all kind of blind because none of them can see because they're all going together so fast, enjoying running so fast like that, like speed culture, blind, and they go over the edge. In the Western United States, especially where I used to live, it was cattle country, ranch country. Then the cowboys would sing the songs about the cattle as one of the main things that they needed to guard, that they didn't get intoxicated like that and then just all run over the cliff to their death. Lose the entire herd, lose their whole livelihood, a great financial loss. I'm speaking about this in terms that people these days talk about so much. Just if we look at it, in fact, that type of behavior, it's how you lose your livelihood. It's how you come to grave loss. So there's a warning there from the old American cowboys and this old American cowgirl. So in the Rahula Ovada Sutta, in the middle length discourse is number 62, the Buddha advises developing this mind that is in tune or in harmony. And he gives specific advice that relates to our natural world that I think is very important for us right now. He speaks to being in tune and in harmony with the natural elements. Now, we learn these lists of the 4 elements or 5 elements or 6 elements. He specifically advises Rahula then in this teaching with regards insight, meditation practice, vipassana meditation practice, to develop this mind with regards the elements for the sake of developing insight and liberating wisdom. This practice is about coming into tune, coming into harmony, and it contributes to awakening to the truth of non-self, at least on the bodily level. So that would be stream entry or opening the Dhamma eye. Very, very significant point in the course of this Buddhist practice. So the Buddha speaks about the earth element, looking to the earth externally and internally and externally, recognizing that these elements that make up the body, that are like earth elements, solid as well as the liquid, as well as the gaseous, as well as the space, that all of these are basically just earth element or water element or air element. We could say, just the same elemental properties. And I feel this is so important for humanity right now because something has happened in the culture, the ideology of humanity, wherever it's come from, where there's been this disconnect. There's been this disassociation. And we learned somehow There are these ideas like the body is evil and the body comes from the earth and the earth is evil and needs to be subjugated, needs to be dominated, and is for exploitation. And then we relate to ourselves, our fellow humans, animals, and the whole natural environment as a ground for exploitation. So this would be considered a grave bent or distortion or corruption in the Buddha's teaching. This type of view and then this type of intention and these types of actions going in the bad way, going to the dark side, according to what was said earlier. And this type of meditation that the Buddha recommends in the sutta on the earth element, water, fire, air, and space elements, so 5 in this case, not the consciousness element. Through these meditations, the Buddha says explicitly that negativities fade from the mind. It writes negative distortions in the mind, and these negative impressions with regards to the body and self and world then fade from the mind. And so he prescribes this particular series of meditations on the natural elements, a progressive series of meditations, followed by then meditations on the apamanas, the 4 immeasurables, to make the mind healthy and just healthy and well and unbounded, unlimited, to be able to include absolutely everything, internal and external, in both a healthy and a liberating way. So these meditations fall in the class of liberations of mind. And I feel that this is just so important for us, a kind of key point of insight in terms of our contemporary culture and contemporary world. That is with regards to negative views of both the corporal body and of the earth that Western civilizations have inherited perhaps from earlier Christianity or from other teachings, but these would not be considered like a right inheritance in Dhamma. So for what inheritance is there in our world, I want to really frame this in light of moral awakening, to know that if inheritance is there, we can take it and use it and take that on or not, and to just be really aware and very skillful, looking at what's happened in the past, and as in the sutta, then also what we're doing right now, to reflect on this again and again. If we realize just right now in our courses of action, of body, speech, and especially mind right now, there is all this various kind of inheritance we have at our disposal, and we can pick up one aspect of it, or we can pick up another aspect of it. And which one are we going to pick up? And then to look back over it again afterwards, just in terms of understanding and marking clearly what was wise, what was wholesome, what was skillful, and then marking in our minds which our course of future action will be. Just putting a tab there. Don't do that. And then thinking which would be the better way. Drawing on more wholesome and liberating, bright inheritance. Yes. So I found it particularly amazing in the Maha Rahula Upada Sutta, this one that I just spoke about, that this teaching, all of this teaching is given preliminary to, as basis for, developing mindfulness of breathing. This is really awesome to me. Many people now are learning mindfulness of the body and mindfulness of breathing, even in the hospital, even in their corporate office to the south of here in Silicon Valley, and all of this. And here, the Buddha, in his great loving kindness to his own flesh and blood son, is given all of this instruction as preliminary to effective work with mindfulness of breathing, such that, quote, it may be of great fruit and great benefit, end quote. So this is what the Buddha said to his son. So I've shared with you teachings that Rahula received from the Buddha at age 7 first, and then at age 18. And I want to mention this because sometimes people think that kids are too young for Dharma, and yet, in Buddhist history or her story, we have both boys and girls who had awakening experiences from stream entry all the way through to becoming fully awakened ones at the age of 7. So, I'm not sure if they're too young. And of course, some of us, even we may get to age 70, 80, 90 and still be like too young for these teachings, not ready yet. So it may not be so much about physical age, but I feel like, this first teaching was one given to a child at the age of 7. How important. I didn't learn this clearly as a kid. I didn't learn it clearly at school. I didn't learn it clearly at home. And when I went with friends, I wasn't raised Christian, but when friends brought me to Sunday school to visit, we weren't being taught that. That wasn't part of what we were taught there in the Sunday school either. And maybe I had to attend more than once to learn it, but, I feel like this is very important if we think we might have a next generation of humans, if we think we might be reborn as a human being again, rather than a hell being or a hungry ghost or, so many of us hope to become angels or something, according to most kinds of teaching, you have to do a lot of that bright path stuff to or at least turn your mind towards the bright path and away from the dark paths and to become an angel. But if we think we might want to further develop in Dhamma again, if we pass away before we've completely developed this path of practice and we think we'd like to continue being a human here in this realm is supposed to be really ideal as compared to other types of embodiment or incarnation, even compared to being an angel or a great high-level heavenly being. This is supposed to be a good middle ground for this middle way, effective middle way path of practice. So I think not only for us, but also for our children. Rahula was age 7. Rahula was age 18. That's, is it just coming into puberty for a young boy? Is that right? Age 8, age 7, age 8, and then as a teenager. So for kids, for teenagers, the final teaching that was given to him, it was the last straw was given at age 21. So the one when he became a stream enterer, the Rahula Ovada Sutta. I really like this one. I'm not going to tell you the whole sutta, but at that time, just because I was talking about angels and devas, at that time the sutta says that the Buddha sensed that Rahula was ready, that he was now ripe for further instruction. Then somehow a whole host of thousands of devas also knew that simultaneously, and they thought, let us go. The Buddha is going to go teach and give instruction to Rahula, who is ripe and ready for this Dhamma teaching. So they rejoiced and then they went along also to that area. And then at that time, listening to that teaching, Rahula opened his Dhamma eye and the whole host of devas, oh, no, I told you wrong. I jumped ahead. Rahula became, quote, freed from the corruptions through clinging no more, through the ending of craving, clinging, and attachment, and the straightening out of any distortions, corruptions, events in the mind, he became free. And many thousands of devas also opened their Dhamma eye, according to the sutta. So it's so beautiful. So wonderful. If there are any devas listening now, may they also rejoice. And I wish that they would as well. I'm going to finish my Dharma reflection right now on the short verse from the Rahula Sutta, that's from the Sutta Nipata, the second section, Sutta number 11. Um, and it's very nice. The first word in it is animita. So this means without a sign or signless. So this mind, when we become fully mindful, when the corruptions are absent, when our minds become clearly comprehending, there is the state where the mind becomes like without things that are being snagged on, without sticking points. Yes, it's without distortion. So animita often it's a sign word for the sign of the absence of greed in the mind, the distortion of greed, the absence of the distortion of hatred, and the absence of delusion, where there's just clear knowing in the mind. I think we can sense. I know I can sense when I just see ignorance in the mind, and it's just like, maybe there's not even much of anything else. It's just perceptive of ignorance, like just stuck by ignorance, blocked by ignorance, bound by ignorance. Yeah, doesn't even need to be, going into greed or aversion or anything like that. But applying the mindfulness and clear comprehension, the clear knowing, seeing and knowing, like sunshine on clouds, and the clouds burning off, the mist clearing, and then the air, the sky just being clear. That would be like animita. So it comes in a group of signlessness, desirelessness. Actually, what is desirelessness in Pali is apanihita, which means not bent on anything. So it's without the distortion of the mind being not just clear and straight and free flowing, but it's like it's attached to something, bent on something. So without that, and then emptiness, sunyata. So it comes in the group of three. So this verse says, the old translator Tathālokā says, quicken what has no sign. More contemporarily translated as meditate on the signless, or develop then that signless state. Be rid of warping pride. So here there's the word mana, which means pride or conceit, and the relationship to that is considered a warp or a distortion. It's called ujjaya, which is like something that burns us or consumes us. It's never satisfied and leads to ruin. So it means to sweep that away. To sweep that away. Now the Buddhist monks have the practice of sweeping meditation on a daily basis, but it means to give it up, to let go of it, to move away from that which burns us, consumes the mind. It's never satisfied and leads to ruin. So get rid of the warp and the distortions of pride and conceit. And then by thoroughly understanding that very mana, thoroughly understanding that, so thoroughly understanding here is also very interesting. Abhisama gacchati. To come to understand completely, to grasp fully, to master. Abhisama charika, belonging to the sphere of ethics, morals and ethics in the Buddha's teaching. What is to be practiced? The base of wholesome and liberating conduct, Sika or Dhamma, Abhisamaya, coming by completely, insight into full comprehension, realization, clear understanding, grasp, or penetration. This is what we're asked to do and what Rahula was asked to do. The sutta says that the Buddha exhorted Rahula in this teaching over and over and over again. And it's been kept in a category of teachings to give to the novices in this path of practice, to be reflected on and worked with over and over again. By thoroughly understanding this conceit and pride, then it says, you shall fare in calm, you will live in the highest peace, truly as a peaceful one will you fare. Upasanta, upasama, the highest tranquility, who has, and now here this is old language, but I kind of like it because it's poetic, who hast in the mind mastered vain imaginings, then mayest thou go thy way, calm and serene. It's old language, yeah, but I really love it. So it says the Buddha exhorted in this over and over again. And here in these teachings, we see the coming together and the merging of ethics or morality with meditation and insight. Wisdom, insight, knowledges, and wisdom, all coming together in united and integrated in this course, this path of awakening, practicing the path of awakening. So this ends my my reflection here on this subject. And I want to now offer to any questions. Both of these teachings, if anyone wishes to have the notes from the teaching, either the first one or the second one or any of them, please let the organizer know, and we will be to share notes. Did you want to mention something? I think there's someone else there. Aniwamo, would you like to give the turn first to someone here or someone who's online?
Sorry, can you repeat a little bit louder?
Would you like to give the time now for question?
Yes, there is still time for questions. So if anybody has any question, there is you're still welcome. It is appreciated.
There's one of them here who she put her poems in Anjali, so I think she has something she'd like to share or ask.
I just wanted to mention that
one more, are you able to hear her?
Yes, I did hear her, yes.
in the way, not seeing certain tenets in humanity or exploitation of resources sometimes, well, it's Western. So I just wanted to say that from my experience, there was enormous really appreciated what you were saying about the element contemplation. I didn't get that connection with the earth element, all the 5 elements, or 4 elements, as it's to also protect them. And then, could you talk about how the Lord Buddha started to talk about element contemplation, and then it went into the Apamanas, the Brahma Viharas. Yeah, so if you could, if you could talk about how that, what is the significance of that progression from the elements to the Brahma Viharas?
Yes. So, as I understand this, this is beginning with meditating on the great elemental properties, and in this case, 5 of them. Sometimes it's taught as 4, and sometimes 5, sometimes even 6. In this case, 5 of them. So the meditation on the earth element, whatever has the property or characteristic of the earth element, internally and externally, and developing that meditation related to the earth element. And then we often say in English, we learned in school these elemental properties as solid, liquid, gas, for 3 of them, and then heat, like the fire element. In this case, there's 1 more, which is space. So in this particular teaching, then, not only seeing the earth element and also the water element, and then the air and properties of heat or coolness internally and externally, but also the quality of space. And that's the last one in contemplation. So, in my experience, what happens when we look at this closely is we see these bodies that we think are so separate and different, that they're literally made up of all that stuff out there, and that there's this interchange happening all the time. There's really, no line. There's really no barrier. These bodies are that. That is these bodies. It's all all the same kind of thing with these elemental properties. Yeah? And even then, if you were to go direct from there to the body and to the breaths, even, you look at the breath coming in or out. Or there was one teacher that I worked with one time who asked us during a retreat, and we had a cleaning period also, and for those who are sweeping and that kind of thing during the retreat each day, how much of that is skin and hair. Those who are cleaning the bathrooms during the retreat time, and it's all these liquids that come from the nose and from all these other parts of the body. They're cleaning up out of the bathroom floor and the sinks, and then the hair and the skin and all of that. And is that we look at that and that's gross. It's dirty, it's gross, or this kind of thing. And yet, we're taught to see the food that we're taking in, and then the process in the body, and then what's coming out in the toilet and the environment. It's just all in flux and in interchange all the time. And any line that we draw in the process is really hypothetical. You can put it anywhere you want to. It's just a convention. And when you start to see that, that hypothetical line disappears, and then you realize that hypothetical line has been holding so many things. It's been a sticking point. It's been a grasping point. It's been a point of friction that I've been struggling with and suffering with for so long. And then when that, that line is not held as a line like that anymore, there's an opening, an unbinding, a liberating of the heart. That's even just coming with, looking at these are called physical elemental properties. Of course, there are similar elemental properties mentally. There's the way, and the Buddha speaks specifically in this particular sutta about the mental the elemental properties. So this is for the balancing of the mind, the harmonizing. This is the sama appears that I was talking about, the sama that I was talking about in the samanya or the samana, is mentioned here specifically for the harmonizing and balancing of the mind. The Buddha is saying to Rahula to do this for harmonizing the mind, for looking at how the mind is like the earth element, and even deliberately making it like that, as a way of actually like grounding and liberating the mind using these elemental properties. So if these qualities are, under the sway of ignorance, then the earth element can be like, the mind gets blocked, hard, stuck, blocked, or this kind of thing. Or, if you just imagine the kind of strong natural occurrences that are dangerous for humans, then also there's the way with the water element that it can become like a typhoon in our own minds. But that's what we're transforming. That's what we're reflecting upon the water element in a different kind of way. And here, then all of these go out to a kind of bordering on the limitlessness of the property. And this is explicitly mentioned in the suttas. So it's very close and personal with these bodies, but then it goes out to the sense of limitlessness with that property. And this is one of the connections then, working them into the appamana, the immeasurables meditations. So this is clearing up negative distortions in the mind, particularly with regards to self-views, and where the self-views really delimit our mind, as I was saying, where we get stuck with them, is opening those up and starts to make them much more healthy, wholesome, and realistic. Yeah, just real. Not this kind of artificial idea of ourselves as if we were in impermeable bubbles or something. Self is inside and everything else is outside, and that's the idea of the atta, the self or the ego that can seem so hard and impenetrable sometimes, or like it can feel like it's strictly delineated if one doesn't look carefully at what's going on. And starting with the body, starting with the elements, and then these properties in the mind, it is zooming in and looking at them very carefully. And then it's kind of like, there's this table here in front of me that has the computer with the camera on it, and I know from science that if I were to look at it closely, then it looks like it's a solid object. But if you start to look at it closely, you see there are just all these little particles that are there, and then the space is much, much more than that, much, much bigger. And there's not actually any kind of sticking really anywhere. There's just so much space, right? And when we look at these things, then there is that effect in the mind. And so we're coming out to, unhinging or unhooking one of the main sticking points of the mind, and then moving into these beautiful, beautiful, radiant qualities of the mind that are the Brahma Viharas, the loving kindness, metta, and karuna, compassion, and mudita, and appreciation, and the antithesis of their hindering and sticking opposites. And you have a good ground then for the mind to be able to really, really expand and unbind with that beauty and that wholesomeness and become unlimited. Yes, if you come back to the body and back to the breath with such a mind and such an understanding, then you know how you experience the mind and the breath, the body at that point is very, very different. And that's the ground then that the Buddha is saying here is like truly excellent for the practice of the mindfulness of the breath to be of great fruit and benefit, and that Rahula then practiced with in a wonderful and liberating way. Yeah? So that was a long answer to to a question. I'd like if there's anyone from far away via the web who has a question or something to share. I'm going to put on my glasses now so I can see you. Aha. Not like the misty elements all just around. It's the illusion of there being some kind of clear delineation, but just as an expedient means for right now. Please, to anyone's question. Or anyone else here. Yes, there's one more here.
Lisa, can you unmute yourself? Okay.
Aha, oh, there's one here.
That works. Thank you very much for your beautiful talk. I took many pages of notes because I didn't know we were recording, but I'm so happy to hear that they've been recorded, and I look forward to coming back to them many times. So thank you very much. I have so many reflections, and we talked about children and how they're so ripe for Dharma. We talk about this beginner's mind, and I just and this moral basis for samadhi. I think children are in such a good place for that, because maybe not all children, but there's an innocence that is very prevalent in childhood, that when we get caught up in our hormones in teenage years and then into the adult world that isn't, the conventional world that isn't always conducive to morality, at some stage we have an experience where we feel that we lose that innocence, whether it's getting impatient or angry or more serious things that happen to us. And so I really appreciated you mentioning that, because it made me reflect on my own stages of life. And I wonder sometimes if we need to fall in order to understand our fallibility. So as children, there's just this beautiful innocence that's there, and it's so conducive. I really think that children, especially at a certain ages, like maybe 10 or so, that they have this beautiful morality that's starting to ripen in its own form. And I just think that's really conducive to practice and to insight. That we as adults, we may lose that. We may lose that beginner's mind. But in that loss, we can somehow, like I was mentioned last week, just on reflecting on my question last week, I was sort of wondering if we could if the Buddha ever gave the stages towards despair. So the way that you've presented it today, I suppose I could go backwards through that and say, well, these would be the stages towards despair and towards moral undoing. And I'm sorry to go on for so long, but I'm wondering if if there was any sutta where, I think last week what I was referring to was maybe before despair, and sort of recognizing that in myself and in the world there are these moments and stages that come before the despair. And you mentioned ignorance. It's not necessarily craving or hatred, but there's maybe a little veil that comes over. And if we can catch ourselves at those stages, if we can be aware of those stages and catch ourselves, maybe we'll catch ourselves before it's too late, before we're actually really falling into despair. And maybe they're just little sort of markers. But what you shared this evening around the reflection process, I think that's really beneficial. That's just a really terrific tool where we can catch ourselves. Anyhow, so thank you.
I say this next part now with some sadness. Before they, get suppressed or badly distorted or that kind of thing. And I see for the children, this natural ability to be mindful, and even for absorption, to just be completely, wholehearted or whole-minded about something, and for such qualities of joy, and also, the moral sensibilities that are there. In there's variation between humans, which is one of the things that, some part could be genetic, but some part seems like karma makes more sense to me, especially when you have two children from the same parents and they have very different sensibilities in these regards. But as you mentioned, there are these qualities that are there that you may be calling innocence. I'm not sure even if innocence is the right word. I think they're just natural qualities for human beings, and it seems to me in parenting and in education, it would really behoove us. It would really be well for us to more recognize those qualities and see how they can be further, not diminished, not distorted, but really supported and allowed to grow and become more so. For adults who learn meditation, often they have to go into a different kind of reverse process that's like, undoing so much conditioning that's happened in the meantime, that's distorted their moral sense or suppressed it, or occluded it, or that's fragmented and scattered their mind. We have the ability to just be completely whole-minded, and it's such a joyful experience for human beings when we are. And yet there's so much social tendency, and for the kids, young kids now too, towards distraction and fragmentation, and then especially anxiety and depression that often comes together with that. And then with the anxiety and depression, with the depression, then a sense of meaninglessness, a sense of powerlessness, and thoughts and feelings that are really damning. They're going in the dark way, going down the tubes. And there's so much of that right now that that's where it starts to look like a large-scale social concern to me, and why I'm speaking about the culture and the cultures of these things. And I really see, having lived in different places in my life, I've been very lucky to go to live in Asia, in Southeast Asia and South Asia and East Asia, as well as in Europe, in Scandinavia, and a little time in Canada, and here in the United States, and even Australia and New Zealand. How fortunate, how amazing. What this shows me is really the strength and the power of culture. I can see the things that are common factors in our humanity, and then also I can see the big differences that are there, that are happening, that are culturally based. And I see there are cultures that, to my mind, just seem so much more happy and wise, or so much more free-flowing, and others that are, just have like these deep, unwise aspects that are really strong. And, I talk with the kids in the morals and ethics group at the local Thai Wat. In fact, I was one of the founders of that group more than a decade ago, that series of classes for the kids. And last time I was there, what's their hot topic, talking to them about their hot topic, they're really concerned about these issues and about what their inheritance is. And by that group that was they combined two groups, so between ages 8 and 15, mega stress. Those poor kids are feeling so concerned and so stressed about what's going on in the world and what they're inheriting. And like the parents and teachers are supposed to be the controllers, but then it looks like if they're not wise, then why should I obey them and do what what they're saying and how to navigate that. Yeah, and I feel like the Dhamma has so much good to share that can be a support and can be an encouragement and can give good guidance to those who are not only elderly or middle aged, but also to the teenagers and also to the young ones. But to be able to share that, if we're going to share that as adults, we have to do the work with it ourselves, and through doing that work ourselves and understanding how it works, and through really seeing clearly what's going on with the young ones, then it's not just imposing something from outside that's disassociated from their experience, as I spoke about last time, but properly to connect with them where they're really at, and along the paradigm of the 4 factors of right effort in the Noble Eightfold Path, to really give support to what is the natural qualities of virtue that are there, and they're having been born human, and to clearly try to protect from the things that are problematic. And of course, with love in our hearts, that's what we want to do for our children. Of course, the wisdom part, the clarity and the wisdom part is so important, and doing the work ourselves, as well as that sharing, thinking about, as in the first sutta, really thinking over and over again about the welfare of self and others, and self and others. And over time, not just short run. Short term is very important. If people get, it's a balance. It's a balance. If you look too much to the future and you don't come enough into the present, it doesn't work well. And you come out of yourself and there's a disassociation, But if you look too much at the present and you don't look one step ahead and you don't look at the effect of the actions, then you trip on what you're setting yourself up for a fall, to trip on what's been done. And for the past, if you damn yourself for it, then that's making your road to hell, right? Into the present and future. But if you learn well from it, then it becomes a great teacher. And I think when I hear these things, I know this, we know this, when we're wise, when we're mindful, we know all these things. Yeah, it's a matter of really bringing that wisdom, bringing that mindfulness up into our consciousness over and over again, and letting it expand and just take over the whole field. There's a place for effort, for our effort. So I know that one of our friends here, she had folded her palms in Anjali also, and let me check with Aniwamo if there's still a couple of minutes for one more question.
Sure. Please go ahead.
All right.
My question is actually sort of related to what you were just talking about, but thinking about how to allow the Dhamma culture to engage with or influence the non-Dhamma culture. And it seems like a lot of this, an investment in sustainability or an investment in the next generation or what's going to happen once I die, requires either a belief in the concept of rebirth or maybe having a child, which gives you a little bit more of an investment. So looking at the dominant culture, which is not necessarily embedded in those ideas, where are the inroads for engagement or influence there?
Oh, that's wonderful, and it directly relates to what the meditations that were there in the second sutta that we were talking about, because the working with the elements and taking down that boundary, that barrier that's created in the mind, that enables and opens the way for compassion. And with the kindness and the compassion, and even if that's not our own physical child, as with the Buddha in this story, or Rahula, his son, who in some traditions, I think in some Nalanda traditions, is supposed to have gone on to become a really excellent and fantastic teacher of the lineage. He had no physical child. Went into monastic life at age 7 and is not recorded as committing any parajikas, no expulsion into monastic life offenses of the first type. And yet, as a great teacher, out of these meditations, then arose another basis for that sharing, for that Dhamma sharing, both in seeing the truth of non-self, that insight, as well as with the kindness, the compassion, the appreciation. For the third of the Brahma Viharas, for mudita, it's hard to translate properly in English because we don't have the word. And so we often say joy or appreciation, sympathetic joy, empathetic joy, this kind of thing. And yet it's the opposite. It's the antithesis of the mind that looks at others in a kind of way that would stop us from that sharing. So resentment. It's the opposite or antithesis of mind or attitudes of resentment. Resentment makes us feel like we're more entitled. It privileges the self over the others. And then there are all these ideas that say why it's more important for me to do this for myself only, in a way that is like not so clear, not so wise. So it's not holding self and other equally or in balance. When we go into the fourth, the quality of Ubeka has the quality of being able to pass through absolutely everything, and non-discrimination, and of balancing the mind. So when we experience what Ubeka is, and one of its characteristics is the feeling like being able to pass through, and it's like evening out everything. It doesn't make everything all the same in one way. I mean, it's like one of those chairs is taller than the other chair, but in my mind, they're different, but they're equal. My desire or my aversion is not privileging one over the other. Although, if I want to go in that direction, like Lisa Karuna was saying, then I could think, oh, my friend gave that chair. There's a special story attached to it. If we're going to talk about giving away the chairs, sure, you can give away all those chairs except that one that my friend gave to me, right? And she's a special friend, and this kind of thing. And yet that's how you can go into the story, and suddenly that chair becomes bigger in my mind and more important than the other ones. And I'm just, it's true. Yeah, and I'm just making it up. But a moment before thinking like that, all those chairs are equal. And then suddenly thinking in that kind of way, as Lisa was talking about those chairs, not only are they different, they're not equal in my value system anymore either. So this type of, like this sutta, the way that it repeats over and over again, for the body, for the speech, for the mind, for the past, for the present, for the future, for self, for others, those characteristics are repeated, every one of them, over and over again. And the part about the self and the others, I feel it in the body, with mindfulness of the body, how something shifts and changes, and it's almost like it's rewiring the body in a way. And I've seen for the young kids how, unless they're taught otherwise, unless they're taught to behave differently, children often have so much love and compassion for the other children and for animals, and even like to join you in tree hugging, that kind of thing. So many adults won't do that, but the kids will happily right away. And why is that? So there's the connection. There's the connection there. Working, repeating the things over and over again, doing the meditations, we can see for ourselves how that shifts. And again, it's not making something that's outside of our natural human abilities. And I'd say the merit and virtue of being a human being and what we're wired for. It's not outside of that. It's coming back to those things, and like so the bent that was there, it's just like unbending it. Where the contortion was, where the binding was, just opening it up and allowing that to become free flowing. And I'd say like natural. Dhammata means like according to Dhamma, according to the meaning of the Dhamma, but it also means just what's natural. And many of the masters then speak about what they're experiencing like that. After so much sutta study and all this meditation and working with all these precepts and this kind of thing, and then finally they say what they found is just natural. And yet all of that work helped them to touch back into that and to activate that potential and to clear, to unbind, to release the things that were hindering or obstructing. So I realize we've come to the end of our time now for today, and I want to thank Sikyu, SICGU, and Aniwambo, especially, and the monastic community here for all of your support and care, and all of the supporters of this community to even have the technology to be able to be with you like this, and everyone who's joined in together. Now, I'd like to chant a very short blessing in closing, and if anyone knows this, then they're welcome to join in the chanting together. This is like a blessing and dedication. And if anyone wants the text for it afterwards, we can ask Lisa to send it to Animamu. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and humor. May the forces of diversion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble Lord. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all beings, through darkness and delusion be dispelled. Sadhu, sadhu. Anumodana.
Thank you very much. Also from the Sikyu, from everybody from Sikyu. And I wish you a great afternoon, great evening, and hoping to see you next week. Looking forward to it. And I wish you good practice of what we've learned.
If we practice what we've learned, next week we should all be awakened ones gathering together. So even if there's a big storm and we have no internet, we should be able to get together anyway.
Yes, that would be excellent.